This is part 3 of my Linux command line course. In this video, I will teach you how to create and remove files and directories in the terminal and how to utilize path names more efficiently. Creating and removing files and directories is a basic skill. You can create files and folders in the graphical file manager using the mouse, menu options, and keyboard shortcuts. In the terminal, files can be created in many ways. Perhaps the simplest way is to use the touch command. Its main function is to change existing files' datestamp. However, it is more commonly used to create files. This command requires at least one path name to a file. For example, this command created a blank file called hello.c in my home directory. If you watched the previous video, then you are familiar with the general concept of the path name. Path names are used with commands to tell the commands where a directory or file is located on the file system. I have introduced two path name styles so far: absolute path names, which start with the root directory, and relative to home path names, which are used to refer to users' home directories and their contents. Most commands accept multiple path names as parameters, separated by spaces. Here's another example of the touch command use, which will create two files. One called store.txt in /tmp, and one called customer list in my desktop directory. Removing files in the terminal involves using the rm command. This command accepts multiple path names as well. For example, here's how I delete the 3 files I created all at once. There is no trash in the command line. Any operation that removes a file is instant and irreversible. There's no confirmation dialog or undo. So be careful and always have a backup of all files. The graphical file manager always provides up-to-date information, but you would not normally have it available when working with the command line. Neither the touch or rm command provide a confirmation whether a file was created or removed. Normally, they would only produce output in case of an error. You need to use the ls command should you require a visual confirmation. Technically, removed files can be recovered, but such operation is beyond the skill of an even experienced user and rarely 100% reliable on a multi-user system. I will go into more detail on this topic in a later video. The touch command can only create files in directories that exist. For example, the following command will fail as a directory named November does not exist in my home directory. I would need to create the November directory first before this file can be created. The touch command cannot create directories. We have another command called mkdir for that, which I will introduce in a few moments. So far, I have used a mix of absolute and relative to home path names in this video. The relative to home path names are preferred for contents in the home directory over absolute path names, as they are shorter. While I like using relative to home path names, even they can be lengthy. The shell supports a third style of path names called relative, which tends to be shortest in most cases. Not to be confused with relative to home path names, relative path names start in the present working directory. Relative path names can access the entire file system, so you can use them instead of both absolute and relative to home path names. As an example, this is how a file called customer list would be created in my desktop directory, now using a relative path name. The shell assumed that the path starts with my present working directory, which at the moment is my home directory. In this case, the relative path name is shorter than relative to home, as I did not type the ~/ prefix. In case it is not clear, regardless how each file was created, any file can be later accessed using any of the 3 path names, with the practical goal being shortest one at that moment. Relative path names, when written, do not start with any specific symbol, such as absolute with the / and relative to home with the tilde. At the same time, it is very easy to identify a relative path name. A path name is relative if it does not start with a / or tilde character. The initial challenge when using relative path names is understanding the dynamic nature. They change depending on the user's present working directory. If I wanted, for example, to delete the customer list file currently located in desktop, I can right now use the same path name with the rm command to delete it. This will not be true if I change my present working directory, for example, to desktop. The customer list file is now in my present working directory, which is desktop, so now the relative path name to it is just the file name. Here's how I delete it now using a relative path name. The shortest path name to a file or directory is their name on its own, but it can only be used if it is in your present working directory. I would like to emphasize that using a cd just to shorten the path name with this rm command or any command in general would not be efficient. I only use the cd command to illustrate the dynamic nature of the relative path names, and you would not normally use the cd command in such scenario. In general, the cd command should be used only if multiple operations are performed in the target directory. Unlike absolute and relative to home path names, relative path names are bidirectional, and you can use them to go up the file system tree too. The special ... expression is used to indicate the up direction, and it represents the parent directory. When used, the ... expression would appear by itself or at the beginning of a path name, but not in the middle or at the end of a path name. For example, here's how I would recreate the hello.c file in my home directory using a relative path name. In this command, the ... means my home directory, parent directory of desktop, which is my present working directory. It is very important that the parent directory is never named in a relative path name, and if used in a path name, it is always indicated by the ... All directories except the root directory have a parent directory, and you can use as many ... symbols as needed, separated by slashes to reach as far as needed, with the root directory being the limit. Here is how I would obtain a listing of the /tmp directory using a relative path name. This path name reaches 3 levels up. In this case, the relative path name is clearly longer than the absolute equivalent of just /tmp, and therefore not the best choice. But this relative path name illustrates well how we can traverse the file system tree up using the $. Symbol. The first ... is my home directory, the middle ... is the /home directory, and the third ... is the root directory in this example. Not all relative path names will start with the ... only those that need to pass through the parent directory, those that need to reach up. Understanding the relative path name requires practice, so give it time. Always use it whenever it gives you the shortest path name out of the 2 or 3 choices available, and I will do the same from now on in this tutorial. Let me go back to my home directory. The easiest way to accomplish that is through the cd command without any path name. The mkdir command is used to create directories in the terminal, and it requires a path name as a parameter. As an example, here's how I can make a directory called hello in my desktop directory using a relative path name. Just like the touch command, the mkdir command does not normally provide any output. You could use the -v option with mkdir to provide verbose output, but most users just use the ls command as needed. Directories are removed using the rmdir command, which mirrors the functionality of the mkdir command. At least one path name is required, and as always, you can pick the path name style as it suits you. Here is how the hello directory is removed. Again, I could use an absolute or relative to home path name, but relative path name is preferred as it is shortest in terms of keystrokes in this case. The rmdir command does not provide any output normally, but it also has a -v option for verbose output. Again, most users either trust their skills or use the ls command to verify the command outcome. You can make or remove multiple directories at once by providing multiple space-separated path names with the mkdir and rmdir command. Here's an example where I create a directory in /tmp and my documents at the same time. Keep an eye out for any errors that mkdir or rmdir commands may produce. Some errors are obvious. For example, I cannot make a directory that already exists, or something like this. Here I cannot remove a system directory as a regular user. Some errors are a bit harder to understand. For example, in this case, the rmdir succeeded partially. The sources directory does not exist, so it could not be removed, but the XYZ did exist and it was removed successfully. Some error messages make no sense at all, at least to the beginner. For example, this error says no such directory, but it is not about the one I'm trying to make, which is Splash in this case, but rather about the parent to Splash, which is desktop with a lowercase d. Directories are expected to be created inside directories already in existence. In this case, the desktop directory is not spelled correctly, as the existing desktop directory name starts with a capital D. The Splash directory was not made because of the error, and I need to repeat the command, this time spelling desktop correctly. This gives me an opportunity to introduce you to Shell History feature. The shell maintains a history of 1000 users' past commands by default. They are accessible by using the up and down arrow keys. Recalling past commands allows the user to quickly reuse commands exactly as before or with changes. When I press the up arrow once, I can recall the last command, correct the path name, and run the command again. You know already that a shell command is executed by pressing enter. It is important to note that the cursor does not need to be at the end of the line for the enter key to take effect. I can press the enter key right now with the cursor in the middle. I often see even experienced shell users moving the cursor to the end of the command line just to run it, which is a complete waste of time. Older commands are recalled from history the same way, by repeating pressing of up arrow key. The cursor movement within the command line does not need to be done using left and right arrow keys one character at a time. Holding the control key while pressing the left and the right arrow keys moves the cursor one space separated token at a time. You can quickly move the cursor to the beginning of the line using Control A or Control E to move to the end of the line. When it comes to deleting characters within a command line, there is a number of useful keyboard shortcuts as well, and you are not limited to only delete and backspace keys. For example, pressing Control W will erase one word to the left of the cursor, while Control Delete will erase one word to the right of the cursor. When it comes to possibly erasing the entire command line, pressing Control U will erase everything to the left of the cursor, while pressing Control K will erase from cursor to the end of the line. These shortcuts, together with the Control L clear screen shortcut, are tremendously useful, and you need to learn them as part of becoming an experienced shell user. Okay, back to managing directories. There may be cases when you actually want to create multiple directories within each other. For example, in something like this. This command is understood by the shell as make directory C inside directory B, where B is located inside of directory A, with the A directory being inside home directory where I am currently. As is, this command will fail because directories A and B need to be in place first. I could make these directories using 3 separate commands or use one command with 3 path names, but either approach requires unnecessary typing. The mkdir has a very useful -b option, which means make parent directories as needed. In this case, the A directory is the parent of the B directory, which in turn is the parent of the C directory. Here it is in action. This time, the 3 directories will be created successfully. Here is the outcome of this command. I want to see the entire structure at once, and this can be accomplished using the ls command with the -r recursive option. Do not get too caught up with the mkdir-p option though. Use it only when it's actually needed, otherwise you will end up with unintended results. Here's an example. Here I actually wanted a directory called fruit in my desktop, named with capital D, but instead I have now two desktop directories in my home and the fruit directory in the wrong one. The rmdir command can only delete empty directories, even if all they contain is other empty directories. For example, the following command will fail. This is one of the few safeguards that is built into the shell that prevents users from removing non-empty directories by mistake. If I want to remove directory A, I need to delete all contents from the bottom up. I would need to remove directory C first, then directory B, and then finally directory A empty at that point. This is not practical, especially if the directory being removed contains a lot of content, likely a mix of files and directories. As it happens, the rm command has a -r option available for recursive remove of non-empty directories. An rm-r command will do the bottom-up remove operation quickly and without prompting. Be very careful with the rm-r command. Unless extra precautions such as restrictive permissions are taken, mistakes here can lead to catastrophic data losses. In practice, the rm-r command is used rarely, and files and directories are most often deleted one at a time. Use the rm-r only if you must, and only if you are sure what you're doing. Most of all, do not use the -r option with the rm if you are only deleting regular files or empty directories. Use the plain version of the rm command and rmdir respectively in such scenarios. The mere fact that you pause to think for a moment which command to use will help you avoid costly mistakes. That is all for this lesson. Go ahead to the next video, but before you do, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. The next lesson will show you how to quickly build complex file system structures and how to use commands to copy and move files. Thanks for watching.